Just realized I still had my little sticker on. All right, good morning or good afternoon, depending on what time you're in my class. Today's ball work is if you could pick one strategy that you think Neolithic people developed in order to become successful farmers, what do you think they would have done? So what's one technique that they picked up, right, in order to improve their farming? All right, so we are starting a new unit today. The unit is called Origins of Complex Societies in the Ancient World. So origins meaning like where did it originate? Complex urban societies are, we're not talking about small villages anymore, but like the arrival of larger cities, okay? And then in the ancient world. Today's lesson within that unit is the facilitation of sedentary agriculture. Remember, sedentary means like being still, not moving around, in village communities. All right, so terrace farming is the first little thing we're going to cover today. And terrace farming is a method of farming that allows farmers to build steps on the side of slopes in mountains or hilly regions where they grow crops, right? So in your notes, you have a whole section. You'll see there's 3 sections basically for you to take notes on your own. So you might want to define terrace farming. You can put it in your own words, even if it's as simple as like steps on a mountain or steps on the side of a mountain. And then I'm going to ask you some questions as we go through, so ideally jot down the answers to those in your notes. So if you look at the graphic on this slide, that's kind of what it looks like, right? So the first question for you is, predict, what is the benefit of terrace farming during ancient times? So what benefit would this have for them? Why would they bother to do this? If you need to pause the video, go ahead and do that. All right, at this point, I need you to actually pause this video and go to the page in Canvas. I have a 2 or 3 minute YouTube link there that I need you to go watch. So I'm sorry that I have you watch this one and then pause it and go watch the other one, but it is kind of essential because without watching that video, the rest of it won't make quite as much sense. And while I do embed it in class, when I try to embed it in this, it doesn't seem to work. All right. This is just another picture of ancient Incan farming sites in ancient times. It says Peru under my face, but so you can see the steps. I just showed you one, but the steps are still visible even though this is thousands of years later. These ones were built into the side of a mountain. The one on the last slide were more of like a hilly region, but they're both Incan. So terrace farming has benefits. I asked you to predict some, but I'm going to tell you the 2 main ones now. The first one is that it prevents soil erosion and surface runoff. So when it rains, for example, if it's like on a side of a mountain or a hill even, when the rain comes down, it's going to wash away the seeds, it's going to wash away the nutrients. You're going to see the side of the hill eroding, right? Like some of the soil itself will be washed away. And then, you know, if some of their seeds are washed away, then they're not going to have as productive of a crop, right? Kind of on the other end of the spectrum, it also allows for efficient irrigation. So let's say they're in an area that could be prone to droughts or they don't get consistent rainfall. If they have this steps inside of the mountains and they start irrigation at the top and let the water flow down, then they can kind of control how much water each area gets, and they can intentionally let it run off or intentionally let it stay in that area. It just allows them to control the irrigation, and it's more efficient that way. That way the water's going where they want it to go, and they don't have to spend as much time like trying to water crops more. This is just an image of current day terrace farming. I thought it was pretty, but we do still use these in the modern day world. Terrace farming is used all over the world still. So here's a picture of that. What I did want to point out though is, if you can see right here, it's really not the best color. Right. These little areas, that's a terrible circle, but you can see that this is water flowing down, right? So their irrigation starts at the top, and then in certain areas, the water allows it to flow down to the next step. All right, so rather than read this, I'm going to have you pause it and read it yourself. Go ahead and do that. And then there's a question. What difficulties could terrace farming face? So hopefully you paused it to read already. But what difficulties do you see?
Good morning, teachers. Just a a reminder that we do have some testing going on today, so if you
All right, do you miss those announcements? So anyway, what difficulties could terrace farming face? So while they're doing this, what obstacles or hurdles do they have to overcome in order to do this successfully? And if you didn't get them, I'm giving you some ideas. So these steps are not easy to build into the side of the mountain. Like, I mean, think about what do you need? What equipment? How much physical labor to build these steps? If it is a place that's prone to rain, you could face landslides, and all the work that you put into building those steps could be washed away if the landslide is big enough. I got new bangs, guys, so I can't stop fidgeting with them, sorry. And then how steep are the climbs? So the people still have to go up and weed and check these farms, fertilize these crops, and they're still physically touching them. But now, instead of just walking across a flat field, you're going up and down the side of a mountain or a hill, right? So is that considered, to be an obstacle? I would say so. Okay. This is source 2. Again, I would prefer you pause the video. Oh, I can't move my face because under here, well, pause the video, read source 2, and then come back. Okay, so hopefully you're back now. Under my face, I added like an image of tree bark. Like I added these bones to this dirt to show you that it was tree bark and bones. But so if you didn't know, charcoal is made, like charcoal you use on a grill, for example, is made from like burnt wood, right? So they're saying back in the Amazon, they found charcoal that also had not only burnt tree bark, but burnt bones, and it was like the best fertilizer that could have been used. And this was a long time ago. And this article is talking about how we should go back to that it's good for the environment. But the question I have for you is, how would improved fertilization have facilitated the growth of villages? So remember in the beginning we said this whole unit is about the origins of complex urban societies. So how do we see these complex urban societies, and how is fertilization going to lead to that? See if you can answer that. Still on the subject of fertilization, go ahead and pause the video and read this. Okay, so it's so awkward for me to just quietly pause, but I'm hoping you're taking that moment to pause the video, read the article, and then come back. But before I ask you the question on this slide, I want you to look at this painting of Neolithic people, because it shows a lot of the things we've been talking about. So for example, we see families, right? And we know that part of the reason that they decided to start domesticating plants and animals is because they wanted to include children and elderly people. So in this one, you can see an older person on the right and a child in kind of the center. We've also talked about how they've domesticated animals. So you see 2 examples of that in this painting. Can you see them? So the first one is in the background. There is some kind of herd of animals, so possibly goats, or maybe shaved sheep because they're not very fluffy. But you see a couple dogs too, right? And we've talked about the dog domestication in a couple different ways, because yes, they use them for hunting, and yes, they use them for protection, but we've seen in my class that they've also used them as pets, right? Another thing we've seen, or we've talked about that you can see in this painting, is the crops, right? So you can tell that these are not wild because they're very organized. You can see that there's rows if you look closely enough. And then they have an actual little home, right? So they probably wouldn't have built homes this complex, or this structures this stable really, if they were moving around a lot. So this is a more permanent structure. All right, so the question for this is, what is the new perspective on Neolithic farmers according to this source? What was the old thought? So what's changing, new versus old? Take a moment, pause the video if you need to, in order to answer that question. All right, source 4. I'll read this one too since it's short, but it's an excerpt from Chris Hurst, Ancient Farming, Concepts, Techniques, and Experimental Archaeology from ThoughtCo. It was published last year, or in 2019. The Three Sisters is a type of mixed cropping system. So it is like the name of a technique, right? In which maize, which we call corn now, it's pretty much the same thing, beans and squash were grown together in the same garden, right? So you're welcome for these gifts. I spent a lot of time finding these. But the 3 seeds...
Ms. Schrader, please call the main office. Ms. Schrader, please call the main office. Thank you.
I'm just going to leave that in there for you guys just to feel like you're in school. But these 3 seeds were planted together with the maize acting as support for the beans. So as corn grows, right, it has a big corn stalk. So it literally provides like an object for the beans to climb up. And those both act together as shade and humidity control for the squash, and then the squash grows low to the ground, right? The squash acts as a weed suppressant. So that's what Three Sisters intercropping is. However, recent scientific research has proven that the Three Sisters were useful in quite a few ways beyond that. So the question I have for you is, oh, you can't see that. What other benefits might Three Sisters have? So what other ways do you think it could be useful, right? That's the question that my face is blocking. So see if you can answer that. What do you think might be a benefit from intercropping? Or intercropping is when you mix different crops together. Take a moment, answer that question. All right, so this is Sourceboard continued, so it does go on to tell us. It says intercropping in general is recommended as an alternative system for small-scale farmers to improve their yield. And their yield is like how many crops do they get, right? Or how productive are their crops is a better way to say that. And that's food production and income in limited spaces. So you get more food, and then if you are bartering or trading, because this is talking about even more recent, then you get more food to barter or trade, right? Or sell. Intercropping is also insurance. So here's the big one. If one crop fails, one of the crops fail, the others might not. And so the farmer is still likely to at least get one of the crops in a given year, no matter how extreme the weather circumstances are. So let's say, and I'm not a farmer, but let's say it's a dry year, right? And squash just does not do well in dry years. So the squash fails to grow. Well, you still have the beans and the corn. Or let's say a certain fungus comes and kills the corn, right? Well, you hopefully still have the beans and the squash. So they're saying, like, if one or two fails, ideally the farmer will still have something left. And you can't see, but my face again is blocking. It says this is a happy Neolithic farmer behind my face because he has some crops. All right, that's pretty much it. So you should be done with your Cornell notes. And then now you are just going to do the second page. It has 3 panels. One is titled Terrace Farming, one is titled Fertilization, and one is titled Intercropping. And in each one, you're going to draw a visual representation of that. So not all of us are artists. That's okay. Stick figures are fine. Basic drawings are fine. I love color, but you don't need to put color on it. If you're an artist, this is your time to shine though. But I know some people are like, oh, well, drawing is very elementary, but it's not. In order for you to draw a representation of something, you have to understand it, process it, and really know it. So this shows me that you kind of understand what we talked about, okay? Both of these, the Cornell notes and the panels, need to be uploaded onto Canvas. And that's it. Have a great day.